American journalism has always been aligned primarily with the U.S. security state. I got involved in journalism in 2005 because the New York Times and CNN were so devoted to the Bush-Cheney neocon framework of the war on terror, were so uber jingoistic after 9/11 that nobody was really dissenting or questioning or challenging government propaganda. So they've always been aligned with the U.S. security state. The New York Times and the Atlantic and the New Yorker helped sell the war in Iraq, along with Fox News. But what really has happened is that for most of these journalists, these corporate journalists, all they care about is one thing and one thing only. They only have one cause, and that cause is defeating Donald Trump. In 2016, defeating him, through 2020, sabotaging his presidency, and now in 2024, ensuring he doesn't return to power. And their allies in that cause have become the CIA and the FBI, who in 2020 and 2016 interfered in our politics with Russiagate and the lie that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation to try and defeat Donald Trump. And so a lot of American liberals whose perspective is monomaniacally focused on Trump, who only have learned about politics since 2016, really do see the U.S. security state as their primary allies, and they are more loyal to them than ever before. And they really do believe that it's immoral to deviate from what the U.S. security state, the military-industrial complex, thinks and wants Americans to believe. They see their job as bolstering that, as being state media, as being government propagandists. Here is CNN's Erin Burnett, very typical of corporate media, who went on her show last night and seized with rage at the mere possibility that Tucker Carlson would interview Vladimir Putin. And I think what she said is so revealing. Let's listen to it.
A massive shakeup in Kyiv coming as Putin is trying to court the MAGA GOP in the United States. In fact, one of the leaders of the MAGA GOP is in Moscow tonight. It's the man you see here with the MAGA leader Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson. Possibly there in Moscow to interview Putin. Definitely there as a Putin-supporting celebrity. Just listen to how Russian state media is breathlessly celebrating his visit.
Independent journalist Tucker Carlson has flown to Russia from the U.S. via Turkey to Vnukovo Airport. He saw Spartacus Ballet at the Bolshoi Theater, had lunch in a nice restaurant, went for a ride around town, rode the subway. He charged his smartphone via a USB port and connected to a fast and free Wi-Fi internet.
He charged his phone.
Now, I don't know about you, I didn't hear any venerating or celebrating. They were just factually reporting what Tucker Carlson, who's well known in Russia and globally, what he was doing in Moscow. And here's what Erin Burnett, seething with all sorts of emotions, including jealousy, over the fact that she's never broken a story of any kind. She's never done a notable interview. She's imprisoned at CNN as a newsreader reading from a teleprompter within the very rigid lines of what she is and is not allowed to say, sounding like every other CNN host with no ratings and no impact. A complete failure from a journalistic perspective. And here's what she has to say.
He charged his phone. Although they're knowing the details about the fact that it was during USB port may give him reason to think twice about all of this. But look at them talking about him like a celebrity. Everything he does on camera, breathlessly repeated. Now, it is unclear if an interview between Putin and Carlson will take place, but if it does, it gives Putin a chance to sit down with a big supporter.
It might be worth asking yourself, since it is getting pretty serious, what is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that.
I'll actually always remember watching that clip. I was standing in Ukraine 48 hours before the war began there. Well, Carlson then stood by Putin consistently all the way.
Do you hear that? She's so proud of herself that she was in Ukraine around the start of the war. She's actually talking as though this war means something to her personally. Why is it okay for Erin Burnett, a fanatical supporter of the U.S. support for the war in Ukraine? Why is it permissible for her to go to Ukraine, in fact, be so proud of it and boast of it and talk as though she's like a victim of the war? This means so much to her personally. She was in Ukraine when Russia attacked. Why is that okay for her to go to Ukraine, but Tucker Carlson can't go to Russia? Why is it that CNN can interview Zelensky, as they've done many times before, but Tucker Carlson can't interview Vladimir Putin? The difference is that Ukraine is supported by the U.S. security state and Russia is demonized by them. And so in her mind, the only thing a moral journalist does is align themselves with the U.S. security state's policy. You go to Ukraine, you prop up Zelensky, you glorify Ukraine because that's what your government told you to do. That's what your government wants you to do. And every journalist is duty-bound to go and promote the narrative of the U.S. government. Whereas what Tucker Carlson is doing is adversarial to the U.S. government. He's questioning the narrative of the U.S. security state. He's argued against it. And he's giving voice to somebody who wants to challenge it, who disagrees with it. And in her mind, being adversarial to the government is immoral. It merits scorn and outrage. Do you hear what she's saying? She was like, I was in Ukraine, and so this means extra to me. She thinks you can go in to countries only that are allied with the United States. She thinks that you can only interview leaders that the U.S. security state approves of and interview them in a way that allows them to be heard and glorified by the American people. But the one thing a journalist does not do is act adversarial to the United States government. This is the mindset, the rotted mindset of most of the people in the corporate media. That is really how they think. I'm not making that up. I'm not describing anything that's not there. I'm just summarizing what she's saying and how she thinks.
Standing in Ukraine 48 hours before the war.
I got to hear that again.
And the answer to all of them is no. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that.
I'll actually always remember watching that clip. I was standing in Ukraine 48 hours before the war began there.
Oh, so she was really personally offended to hear Tucker Carlson questioning why we should support the war in Ukraine and consider Vladimir Putin an enemy. That was something that struck deep to her core because she was in Ukraine. And so I guess because she was like in Ukraine, it means that no journalist is supposed to question the rather consequential decision of the U.S. government to involve itself in the American Treasury in that war in this way.
Well, Carlson then stood by Putin consistently all the way through. And that is why he can go to Moscow now without any fear of being summarily imprisoned. He's a hero. This was Putin's mouthpiece in the United States, somebody who had turned a blind eye to the atrocities committed by Putin because they were happening far away. Once vibrant towns turned to ruins, mass graves with dozens of bodies in the Kyiv suburbs, a theater full of innocent women and children sheltering, bombed, despite the giant world children written on the roof, more than 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed or injured. And tonight, Putin is trying to seize on the fact that Zelensky's military appears to be in turmoil, capitalizing on a moment of intense American political
Zelensky's government is in turmoil. And a big reason why is because Ukraine is starting to turn against Zelensky because they know that he has lied to them and misled them into a conflict that has been devastating to Ukraine. And the fact that Vladimir Putin says it doesn't mean it's untrue. But this clip shows you so much how these people think. The irony of all of this as well is that CNN has done exactly the same thing and celebrated itself many times. In fact, has gone far beyond what Tucker Carlson is doing, because let us remember that the United States is not actually at war with Russia. They're not considered constitutionally or legally to be an enemy country. We're not at war with Russia. There's no authorization to use military force against Russia. There's no declaration of war against Russia. So even if we were at war with Russia, of course you would still want to hear from government leaders and have them questioned. And the proof of that is what CNN itself used to do. Here, for example, in 1997, CNN, through its reporter Peter Arnett, went to interview Osama bin Laden right after he had declared a jihad against the United States. Here you see the CNN logo in the corner of that screen, and there's CNN's Peter Arnett who is sitting down for an interview with Osama bin Laden. I want to play you a clip of this because, remember, this was before 2001, before the September 11th attack, but it was during a time after which the United States had already designated Al-Qaeda as a terrorist organization, had blamed Al-Qaeda for attacking and killing Americans. He was a declared enemy of the United States, and yet CNN went proudly and interviewed him anyway. Which again is what journalists are supposed to do. You should want to hear from Osama bin Laden, even if you hate him, even if you disagree with him. You should want to hear what he's saying about why he has declared Al-Qaeda and a jihad against the United States, and that's exactly what CNN asked him, and here was his answer.
You have declared a jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
The U.S. government has committed acts that are extremely unjust, hideous, and criminal through its support of the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And we believe the U.S. is directly responsible for those killed in Palestine, Lebanon, and Iraq. Due to its subordination to the Jews, the arrogance of the United States regime has reached the point that they occupied Arabia, the holiest place of the Muslims, who are more than 1 billion people in the world today. For this and other acts of aggression and injustice, we have declared jihad against the U.S.
Is the jihad directed against the U.S. government or United States troops in Arabia? What about U.S. civilians in Arabia or the people of the United States?
We have focused our declaration of jihad on striking at the U.S. soldiers inside Arabia, the country of the two holy places, Mecca and Medina. In our religion, it is not permissible for any non-Muslim to stay in Arabia. Therefore, even though American civilians are not targeted in our plan, they must leave. We do not guarantee their safety.
So, if Erin Burnett had been around CNN at the time, presumably she would have gone on TV and said how disgusting and despicable it was that CNN aired an interview with Osama bin Laden. Peter Arnett wasn't saying you're a disgusting terrorist and calling him names. He was asking him, why do you feel the United States has done things that justify your pledge to attack them? And he was able to explain his rationale. Now, obviously, a lot of Americans heard that and said Osama bin Laden is a despicable human being, but they were better off for hearing it, for understanding what the grievances were. CNN also interviewed Saddam Hussein, and they've done so multiple times. Here is CNN 1991, right at the time of the Persian Gulf War, when the United States was going to war with Saddam Hussein after he had invaded Kuwait. And CNN went and interviewed Saddam Hussein. There you see the CNN reporter with Saddam Hussein, the CNN logo at the bottom of the screen. Because this is what journalists always did and always believed was their duty and function. And now today's crop of journalists are so subservient to the U.S. security state, they view themselves as activists on behalf of the CIA and the FBI and the State Department, and propagandists and aligned with the agencies that want to stop Donald Trump, that they don't even pretend any longer to be journalistic in their function. Which is why she can speak with such pride about the fact that she stepped foot in Ukraine, which the government told her to do and wants her to do, whereas Tucker Carlson is doing something the government doesn't want. Imagine calling yourself a journalist and thinking that a journalist acts unethically or immorally or unpatriotically because they do something that's adversarial to the government, the very core of what journalism is supposed to be about. Again, if you want to go and serve as a propagandist for the U.S. State Department, go work for them and stop pretending to be a journalist. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.